What's good, friendlies and non-friendlies, and welcome back to the stage of history. We're in the LOD-JP comparison playthrough, the last disc. Oh man, how have all of y'all been doing? Hopefully y'all been having some wonderful days, good and great, gracious days. I had the best dream that I've had in a long while. I woke up feeling so good. I had a dream. Whenever I tried to walk and take a step, I kept moving backwards and I was moonwalking. Like I couldn't take a step without doing a moonwalk. I kept trying to walk forward. These were the cleanest of the cleanest moonwalks that I have ever felt or seen in my entire life. They were so clean. I was hitting that thing. It was like I was turning a pedal on a bicycle. Like it was so smooth that I started getting into it and leaning forward. I started snapping like hell yeah. Like it's like a life-changing moment when I woke up. But when I woke up that morning, when I woke up, I was like, God damn, my legs hurt. Like my calves are burning like crazy. And I reached out, I started massaging my legs. It was cramping, like, oh shoot. Like the greatness comes with the consequence. Now it's time for me to finish Legend of Dragoon and beat the game. You know, stop diddle-daddling around and try to beat the game. But I made a mistake. We'll get to that later. I brought up a conversation last time about Sony Japan Studios. From the recent news that came out about their becoming smaller and them closing down a lot of studios and becoming more focused. I read up on it and it said one of the reasons for that is that I believe it was Sony. There was a conflict of approach. Sony wanted Sony Japan Studios to make games that were more on a global scale, a game with mass appeal. Sony Japan Studios, they were more focused. They were like, we want to make games for the Japan audience and make sure that it's a hit in Japan first, and if it so happens to translate well, and then we'll sell it overseas as well. But we're prioritizing Japan, and you know, that's was their approach. And so there was a split between the two. From my understanding is the studio didn't start off, you know, very strictly from what Yoshida had stated in the past about how LOD was a bit of a passion project. It was something that they wanted to make. We're a bit inspired by FF7 in the process of making LOD. But he said that LOD wasn't a response to FF7. It was just something that they wanted to make, and while making it, they were inspired by FF7. Somewhere along the way, this game that they wanted to make, this is just my take on the situation, from my understanding. Somewhere along the way from this game that they were passionate about making, it was the biggest project that the company had ever made up until this point. It started off small and the company grew. They had hired more people to work on the game. Budget started soaring and the company started getting stricter and stricter, and basically became a point where this game has to pay out big time, or we just made a big ass mistake, you know, or we're never going to do this again. And from my understanding is that they were very disappointed that the game did not sell to their expectations in Japan. Now the game went on to America and it sold very well. It didn't sell groundbreaking numbers like FF7 or anything like that, but for a first IP, the game sold outstandingly well, and I think that gets lost in the sauce. This was a first IP. You know, nobody knew where this game was coming from. It was just there. You know, it was a risk. Take it or leave it. And nobody knew. Final Fantasy has a legacy behind it from multiple games that back it up with the quality. It speaks for itself. LOD didn't have that. And so I think that gets lost in the sauce, but that's unfortunately how the story plays out. They wanted the game to sell well in Japan. It didn't sell to their expectations in Japan. It sold pretty darn good in America, but by that point, the company had already disbanded. You know, everybody went their own ways. Yoshida, sorry, apologies if I said that wrong. The producer of the game, everybody went their own way. You may ask, why am I not sad by the possibilities of the Sony Japan studios closing down for good? It's because, the game that I care about, they disbanded decades ago. Why should I care? Why should you care? They've been left. They have nothing to do with that company anymore. They just have the licensing for the game. But, that's about it, the way I view it. They are just holding the game hostage and with no intention of doing anything with it ever, because the game does not match up with their priorities and making Japan happy first, because it didn't sell well in Japan. So they want to bury the game and pretend like it doesn't exist, and I doubt they have any intentions of doing anything with it going forward. Now that the big screw in that train of thought is that they did attempt to make a sequel. At one point in time, we know that there was a sequel planned, though it never came out. So, I don't know, that's just my take, that I don't really feel any sort of way about it, and I feel like the sooner that they give the game to somebody else is the sooner that there is going to be a new project coming from it. That's my take. That's what I believe. It all stems down to their horrible release plan for releasing the game at the same time as the PS2 was released, for releasing a game at the very tail end of a console's lifespan. And this was in 1999. This is at a time where gaming and computerizing things was all the rage. People were seeing significant differences in all these things. They were, people weren't used to seeing graphics like the PS2 at that point in time. That was a huge leap. Everybody and their mama were looking forward to that. So it was just a horrendous release time. And then you're combating with FF8s and the FF9s at the same time, while having no credentials to back yourself up. It just created just a horrible storm for your aspirations for a huge success. So I just think that the sooner that they get over that, and the sooner that they give it to somebody else, is the sooner that everybody wins, and they no longer have to deal with it. We get what we want, and they get to move on, and everybody's happy. So that's just my I don't know how many times I said that. That's how I view it. We'll see how it pans out. And anyways, getting into this LODJP comparison playthrough, we're going through the Wingley cities all the way up until the Wingley cities. We're doing all of them today. We're gonna do all the boss fights. I'm gonna compare the differences, and it's mostly going to be comparisons by defensive values that you're going to see from my party. So all the damage that I take is going to be directly comparable to both versions across, and there's not really much else to talk about other than you get to skip all the boring parts that I have to sit through twice. What's the first boss? The Kraken. The Kraken, he's not a hard fight at all. He's very straightforward. He's way quicker. Way quicker. At one point in time, he took like 4 turns in a row on me. In order to... You don't really get to see that if you're planning, ahead of the game. Because, you slow him down and you speed yourself up and all that, and you just wreck him before he gets a chance to go out on you. So I did that, but he still turned out on me. He got crunk. And so, yeah, that's the main difference. It's way quicker, more HP, beefier, story will tell itself. And this is boss 1 of 3 that we're going to... Actually, it's going to be more than 3 boss fights. Yeah, it's going to be about 6 boss fights in this vid. So I'll check y'all out in a minute. Let y'all enjoy this hot beef injection. And we'll continue. We'll continue in a minute. Be cool. on to the Lost City, and I have to say that I forgot to mention this, but I like Aglis's music. That's probably one of my favorite tracks in the game, right next to Mayfil. I like the low profile vibe that it gives off. You know, it's kind of soothing. I really dig that. But moving on to the Lost City, this is probably my favorite place in the entire game. I really like this one. I like the dungeon, I like the fights. I probably my favorite in the entire game, probably my top 3. And this boss fight is probably my top 2 favorites in the entire game. It's like a 3-way tag, you know, and it's like one of the few times in the game where you're like going back and forth the entire time. They have a strat, you have a strat to deal with their strats. This is like the closest you ever get to what if you can play versus another human. It really geeks out the spirits you know, of planning. So that's what I really like about it. Is there any difference? Well, before we get to the difference, let's talk about what we have to worry about. Now, this is a no item stop challenge, and I have like 1 revive. The only revive that I got after beating Aglis, and so I got 1 revive now in JP. So I have that to work with. Now in this fight, there always is going to be 1 instant KO at the very least. You have the dude on the far left, who I think he's bald. He's a bald dude with a scythe. Whenever you kill him or one of his teammates, he retaliates and kills you. And you have this chick. She heals the other members every set amount of turns. It's not her taking a turn, it's a set amount of turns. And her gimmick is that she doesn't ever attack you unless you attack her. So if you just guard the entire time, she'll never hit you. But the moment that you hit her, she'll retaliate against you. If you hit her with magic, she'll try to do a status effect against you. And so that's how she pans in, you know, with the approach of how you approach the fight. And then there's a dude in the middle who is just there to be a brawler, but the girl could buff him and make him hit a bit more chunkier. Chick status effects, gimmicks, counters. Dude in the middle, beefy. Dude on the other side, he does everything. Instant KOs, magic, physicals. Since I don't have a talisman, because I think that talisman is a cheap way out of it, even though I used it in the fight against Lloyd. Since I don't want to use that, because I'm being a tryhard, where instead of targeting the girl first, that's who you would normally target first. You get rid of the girl, you deal with the instant KO, and just get rid of her healing capabilities, because you don't want her healing her teammates. So instead of taking her out first, I'm taking out the guy who instant kills. But in order to do that, I have to kill him before he gets healed, because he heals by a hefty chunk. Now the difference in JP versus North Americans, he heals for about 1k every set amount of intervals of turns. And JP, she heals for 2k, 2.1k, or maybe it's 2.4k. I haven't looked at it in a while. You'll see it in a bit. So she heals significantly more, and there's no possible way that you can out damage her. There's no way that you can outdo her heals. She'll literally heal somebody from the red and take them into the yellow, and then the next ones will take them from the yellow and put them in the blue. So I'm still going to try this strat. So you're going to see me trying to outdo her healing capabilities and get rid of the instant KO, because I can only deal with it once, can only have 1 prayer. So I have to find a way to survive that and only need 1 prayer in this fight. I'm going to have to use a lot of magic, but every time you use magic, she has an instant KO status effect, but petrification. So that is something within itself that I have to worry about. So to counter that, you want to have a full special. I'm going to try to manipulate all of these things into my favor and deal with it with only 1 angel's prayer, and trying to hold on to all of my heals. I only have 1 heal. Trying to hold on to my heal because I'm going to need it for the final boss. Now here's a huge difference. I was about to forget this. Magic is king in North American. Magic is semi-king in JP. Item magic is borderline trash in JP. You don't get your best damage output from doing that. It may be faster in the long run, but it's not the biggest output of damage. The Psych Bomb is the poster child for this argument. So while in North American, the Psych Bomb is just your biggest attack, you know, always. It could deal up to 9,000 plus. It's a beef. It's a beast. It's a beef. You're gonna see in JP that it's almost worthless. You know, it's the difference between doing 2k damage without any buffs whatsoever and barely getting 400, 500. You know, so it's a huge, humongous nerf. And you're gonna get to these boss fights, and I'll catch y'all in a tag minute. Be cool. So yeah, that fight is easily one of my favorites because of how much goes on into it. You know, it's kind of crazy, but it's also pretty fun, and it's just even funner in JP. So moving on to the last area of this vid, at least, Mayfil, the Death City. Probably the coolest dungeon. Okay, I think that Mayfil is the coolest dungeon in the entire game. You can avoid encounters so easily. Like, the encounter, this is the only place where the encounter, one of the only places where the encounter meter resets for every room that you enter. And I'm like, it should be that way throughout the entire game. And it makes it so much easier to traverse, to so much less of a pain. Aglis is easily the worst dungeon in the entire game. Holy shit, I forgot to bring that up. It is the worst in the entire game. Some people might say the Barrens. Some people might say the Valley of Corrupted Gravity. I'm saying Aglis because the encounter meter is nuts. You can literally go from yellow to red and be spamming on the menu button, and the encounter will eat out your button input and still give you the encounter. It is ridiculous, and it's so long, unnecessarily long. Mayfil is a boss rush. Now this is where I messed up. I mentioned I messed up, and where I realized that I thought that I fought every enemy in the game for the last year that I played JP, and it made me realize that that's not true. Because what happens here today, I'm not going to commentate over it before every boss. I'm just going to do this and leave you guys to see the rest. What I did last year is I fought 2 of the dragons, and I skipped ahead to the boss of this area. And then I came back. It's like, okay, now I got some extra levels. Now I get to fight the Divine Dragon Soul. I must have turned the game off in between that and went there. I was like, oh, I already beat him. I did that again the other day. I skipped him and then I came back for him and he wasn't there. I was like, am I tripping? It's like, no. And then I looked up on the net and found some posts from like years ago. And apparently it's a missable fight because he disappears after you fight the final boss of Mayfil. I was mentioning about having a good dream this morning. I also had some very nice comments that also played a part, because I was just going to get up this morning and just play and just skip it and just like, whatever. I'm not going back 2 hours just to get back up to this point and fight the Divine Dragon. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to beat the game. But after reading those nice comments, you know, yeah, just, the homie was saying like, oh man, like you're doing some great shit and it's some cool things, you know, down in the future, gonna remember this and all this and that. I was like, damn G, that really makes me feel like I'm doing something good. And I was like, all right. So with that maybe, I read that and I was like, okay, I can't skip this fight. I can't skip it. Fuck it. I'm going all the way back 2 hours to save 2 hours ago. I'm going to play it through again. I got up to that point and I fought him just because of that comment. I was going to skip him. I was going to, but that lucky ass comment came through at the right time. But props, P's up, because that son of a bitch Divine Dragon, yeah, he had his dues to pay. Right, so it was a good service. It was the right call. So we're going to see that like at the very end of the video. But I was surprised because I didn't know that it was a missable fight. Feyrbrand, Regole, and those fights are pretty tame actually. I can't say that I noticed any difference. Maybe I just beat them I just beat them too quick. So I can't say that I noticed any difference other than it just takes a little bit longer. But Zachwell, on the other hand, we'll talk about Zachwell when we get to that point. So I'm gonna leave you guys to these two serial mascots, Dragon Souls, and then we'll come back to discuss the next fight. And I'll bid you to these biscuits in a minute. I can't say I noticed anything at all. If you did, feel free to let me know, I guess. I forgot to mention, before I mentioned about Miranda having a special ability in JP, and I went on to later find out that it's not entirely true. It is true and it is possible, and I did do it once and it's on film. But there's something that you gotta do to kind of complete the glitch, to kind of keep it going. However, and I'm not sure, I'm kind of not sure now because of all, possibilities now, but Meru also has that ability, and I don't know if it's intentional or not, but her stun hammer has a 100% stun effect rate. I don't know if it's just my copy of the game, or maybe it's because I did the glitch correctly somehow again. I don't know if that's just the way it's supposed to be, but that's what's happening for me, so I ditched Miranda and I started using Meru as a main, and so that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to get their final abilities, but I don't know, I might have to grind it out at the very end. But I hate grinding, so I never get it through a playthrough. I always get Rose because hers is the easiest to get, because if you use her at least. So I always get Rose. I'm still working on the path to try to get everybody's without having to grind. He's another one where I say is just kind of more of the same, actually. Kind of more of the same. I can't say I've noticed anything out of the ordinary. Can't say I've noticed anything out of the ordinary. Yeah, I just can't say. What I can mention is that he has one trick which I mentioned in one of my tutorial vids, where there's ways to cancel enemies out of their animations and cut their stances short. It's just that, he has this stance where he goes in where he starts pretending to be like a land shark, and he only gets out of that stance if you tank it or endure it for 3 of his turns, or if you do a Dragoon magic towards him. Dragoon magic will cancel him out of his form, out of his stance, and it'll allow you to keep piling on to him without dealing with his ridiculous physical damage that he does with that stance. So that's really the only thing that I really did. Obviously, I only have one angel spirit, so I'm trying to save everything. So I'm playing it smart, keeping some people on defense, really being cautious not to lose a member unnecessarily. Anything else? He has an insta kill. Yeah, for some reason he always does it against me. I don't know what triggers it. It just seems to be random. Or maybe like after a set amount of turns, if you take too long, he does it. But he always does it to me, and I don't know why. Why me? Damn it. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about this one. It's a cool fight, regardless. One of the sickest animations in the entire game. I would say that this is the best attack in the entire... Damn, there's a lot of cool attacks in this game. There's a lot of cool attacks in this game. This is easily the creepiest. We'll have this discussed later. But for now, enjoy the mix, enjoy the sauce, and don't get lost in it, because we're coming right back with the Divine Dragon. Catch ya when I catch ya. Be cool.
レモンズダウン。死ぬ。レモンズダウン。よし。下切り。
死ね。
Divine Dragon. I was expecting him to be hella hard. And I did this, mind you, I did this one. I went back 2 hours playthrough and I said to hell with it. I'm not fighting any extra boss that I don't have to, so I skipped the first 2 bosses. I didn't even bother with the Dragoon spirits. So my level is critically low. So I'm fighting this guy under leveled, only couple heals. I cheated and I'm gonna buy the heals because this one's not, I'm not continuing from this save. And these are just gonna be my attempts It's gonna be my crack at it. So enjoy these cracks at it. And I'll bid you guys further ado, and we'll come back next time, most likely going from this point all the way till probably the final boss. And probably I'll do the final boss as its own vid. And then we'll just have like a Legend of Dragoon time where we just talk about stuff and just, I don't know, read comics together and stuff, and just have our going away party for the year until our next playthrough in December. So I'll bid you guys further ado. May peace be with. Always keep your heads up. Deuces, those both sides of your stay cool. And if you like this content, be sure to show some love, but always be sure to show that love to the people who matter to you. This is ITOwl bidding you fairly most of wells. Stay blessed, stay cool, and be cool.